Right, hey everyone. I'm Julie Johnson, and this is a trauma-informed yoga training. Or sorry, this is where are we at? This is where my thing is up here. Trauma-informed communication and decision making. At Joy of Yoga. So, I first just want to start by talking a little bit about what trauma-informed communication is and why are we doing this, right? So, I think the big thing to understand is, um, the big thing with trauma-informed yoga is the big problem that we were seeing is that, we were really looking at, these rules were coming up, right? How we were, um, it was mostly about like, these different rules around trauma-informed yoga that I was seeing as I was training. And as we were kind of evaluating, maybe some of the errors in the way that I was training and the way that I was seeing others train, we kind of started to look at all of trauma informed care uh through this lens of skills. So what skills do we need? What decision making skills do we need in order to um what's the word? In order to really identify how we need to upskill, what we need to focus on. So we developed um 5 different trauma informed skills in communication and decision making that we say anyone regardless of what you're doing needs to be able to do in order to hold like a trauma informed space, okay? So I'm going to roll through those a little bit today and talk about what that means in terms of how we communicate in yoga. So, we're going to move through the slide deck here. All right, we're going to present. Yes. Public online, all set. All right. I want to make sure we see this. Okay. So, the big thing we're going to start talking about is skills, okay? So, the 5 skills we're talking about are survivor empowered language, and that includes validation and curiosity. In the yoga space, we want to validate people's lived experiences in the moment on the mat. Likewise, we also want to create a space of curiosity. That might sound like, I wonder what might happen if I move my arm. I wonder what might happen um if I hold like move my shoulder a particular way, right? So it's important that we kind of stay in that space of curiosity for sure. Um, okay, hold on one second. Okay. And then the other thing that we have to look at here is how our words and actions are aligning. So the big thing here is transparency. If I have a sub, am I going to tell people ahead of time, right? Um, if I show up 15 minutes late, can I give a warning? Those are like little ways that you can practice aligning words and action. Another big one is more like a body awareness pace, and that is consistency between tone of voice and body language. So I think that that's important, especially when we start talking about emotional abuse, right? Is sometimes that's where, and I'll come back to this later, like sarcasm can't is sometimes not isn't always received well in these like more trauma informed spaces. So because it's that inconsistency, right? My words don't match my actions. And if you've had a history of extensive psychological trauma, that can be a sign of you're not trustworthy. So just being aware, even in those little ways, sarcastic comments, am I holding my body in a way that is out of alignment for my words, right? So those are like, I mean, those are like little kind of nuanced things, but it's important when we start to think through like our heads when we're trying to scout safety, right? When we're trying to really understand what feels safe and we're in that neuroception space where we're like, okay, what's safe, And then when someone's words and actions don't align or their body language doesn't align with their words, that can sometimes be a little bit of a red flag for some people. So it's just something to think through as we are walking around, around in our yoga teacher head is our own body awareness matched with our words. Now, the other thing to think about is boundaries. Okay. How is consent, right? Um, Let my yes mean yes and my no mean no. But also the other thing about boundaries is they're not that clear cut, right? There's something called a bounded choice that we talk about a lot in the world of like coercive control and like cult awareness. But are we ever giving a bounded choice? Are we giving a choice when we actually don't mean to give a choice? So think through consent, right? When that consent is really layered. It's not just yes or no. Sometimes there's a social am I building a space where someone might say no and then yes later or no and then yes later? Because it's never clear cut, especially when we start talking about trauma survivors who are trying to learn how to trust themselves. So just remember consent is layered and very complex. Um the other thing to think about is uh trauma-informed protocols, right? That's where at the beginning of a class, you kinda go through your boundaries. I'm gonna walk around the class. I'll give an announcement before I walk around the class, things like that. So it's just giving your kind of like, "This is how I operate and behave in class," you know? If you need to leave before shavasana, please leave, right before we settle in, things like that. So you give permission for people to do what they need to do without disturbing others, as well as telling people also what they can expect from your behavior. Right? Again, that also goes back to aligning boundaries, aligning words and actions. The other skill we're looking at here is mirroring language. So we're looking at using verbal and nonverbal cues to show active listening, right? So, that would be again, maybe holding more of an I try to hold more of a neutral um body movements. Like if someone's really in an emotional space, I'll try really hard to be just a little bit maybe curious. I'll put my hand on my chin. I might put my hand on my cheek, just to show that I'm attentive to what they're saying. Um, the other skill that we're going to be talking about in this training that I'm going to be doing at Joy of Yoga beginning in February 3rd, is we're going to be talking about culturally contextual language. So this is layered, and I'm just going to say the little bits here tonight. But, the big thing to understand is avoiding assumptions, on gender, right? Be careful, we're not just saying he, she, that we're really maybe taking the time to check in with people's gender or, you know, use she, her, which I did not model that in my own name there earlier. But that's kind of one way that we can begin to model the behaviors that might create a space where language around gender can be um, not even just acceptable, affirming, right? So, and then the other thing to look at is remembering how the impact of words can change depending on the audience. This goes back to sarcasm. Again, sarcasm doesn't work in a lot of cultures, and like I said with trauma survivors, lots of times and there that's a sign of emotion can be a sign of emotional abuse. So just being and it can also be a sign of really like a good coping skill as well, So, but it's just sometimes it's not always great to deliver on. Likewise, certain words that come up like tribe, comes up a lot in healing circles. So, and understanding that, there's is that appropriate in, to be using tribe, that's just an example, or, when we're doing a really ancient practice. So just things, those are all ways and things to consider how the words we use shift depending on who's the audience is and who we are to them. And thinking through the words that are the most going to hold up our highest integrity and their integrity simultaneously. So, that's just a little bit about uncovering the mindful path. This was just a little intro into trauma informed communication and yoga, and understanding how that works when we start to, cultivate trauma informed space holding. I'm going to be doing a whole training on this at Joy of Yoga on February 3rd. I'm going to be going over each skill over the next 4 weeks. So, this was just an overview. I have a skills checklist for you. It has all these skills on it. So you can go download it in the comments, and then I'm going to reshare it in the Facebook page and also in the Facebook group, in Integrate's Facebook group. So you can go fill it out or go check it out, download it, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If not, I'll see you next week and we'll talk about validation.